Well, Fall Faith is 4 weeks old today, and I have to admit I've missed you for the last 2. But it's good to be back. It's good to be back here. And over the last few weeks, we've been hearing a lot about this process of spiritual well-being and what it means to live in the consciousness of God. Now, to use the phrase that Eric Butterworth, the author of our Fall Faith text, Spiritual Economics, uses, we've been learning how to live in the flow of God, how to live in that divine flow that is always there, always within each and every one of us. And this is important stuff. It's so very important because it's from the moments where we live in that flow that we open ourselves up to the allness that is God. It's from living in the flow of God that we have access to all of the abundance, all of the health, the wholeness, the peace of God. Now, Unity's teachings state that we create the world that we experience. And so it seems simple enough. We just think that, well, we're in the flow of God, and as we think about being in the flow of God, then we should get to be in the flow of God, right? Well, it's not quite that simple. You see, there's a misconception that we like to put on that idea that our thoughts can create a reality. A lot of times we get all caught up in the demonstration, in the thing that we're manifesting. We get so caught up in, look at what I manifested. I used the power of positive thinking, and I manifested this thing. But I like the way that Reverend Michael Beckwith states it when he talks about manifestation. What Michael Beckwith says is that manifestation is not about making something happen. Manifestation is about making what's already happening visible. You see, it's already happening. You are already in the flow of God right here, right now. You can't separate yourself from it. The divine flow that's radiating from each and every one of us is radiating from us in this moment. It's always there. It's always available to you. So we don't speak these words of affirmation. We don't state these prayers in order to create something. Instead, we state them to remind ourselves that we're already in the flow of God, that this is already happening right here around us, right now. You see, the truth is, we speak these things to realign ourselves with the divine flow of God. And it's through reminding ourselves of the truth of the nature of God that we reconnect with that flow. It's when we get caught up in thoughts of limitation that we restrict that flow. We open ourselves up to want, to lack, to need, because our mind has been trapped in this thought of limitation. But the truth of the matter is that no matter what you think you are, no matter what thoughts you hold about yourself, you are always flowing forth with the one power and the one presence of God. Always, in every moment. But the truth is, you can only really know yourself and only achieve all that you're capable of achieving when you know, and when I know, that I am in the divine flow of God. Now, we like to use that word a lot. It's the title of the lesson today. I'm living in flow motion. We're in the flow of God, in the flow of life. Get with the flow. We use that a whole lot. So I thought maybe we should kind of unpack what that means. What is this flow of God? Now, before we can do that, it's probably a good idea for us to get just a nice understanding of what God is to begin with. And I really like the way that Eric Butterworth defines what God is. What Eric Butterworth says is that God is a sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Let's think about that again. God is a sphere whose center is everywhere. So what that means is that right where you are, no matter where that is, there is the center of God. So it's right here with Brenda. It's right there with Randy. It's right there with Vicki. That is where the center of God is. It's right where you are in that moment. And it's a sphere whose circumference has no end. There's no end to the circumference of God. Now, if we try to think about this, we end up putting limits on it. We end up imagining a sphere that at some point ends. There is no limit to where God is. Wherever you are, that presence of God is. And because that center of God is harnessed here within you, well, it stands to reason that that center flows out from you. And the truth is, this is the great truth that has been taught by all mystics of all ages. They've all taught that life is best lived from within out. And so this means that the whole universe is concentrated at the point where you are right now. But it's even more than this. You are the universe expressing as you. You are its living enterprise. It forever stands behind you with its full resources. However, the fullness of this universal support comes through you. It doesn't come to you. It's not outside of you that's coming to you. It's coming through you. The fullness of God, the flow of God is always flowing through you. Now, there's a problem with this. And the problem is that we've been conditioned to believe that just the opposite is true. We've been conditioned to believe that we arrive in this world as an empty container that's ready to be filled with the wisdom of the world, the wisdom of those who have come before us. We come as an empty container ready to learn how to interact with the world and how to use the world to get the things that we want and we need. But just the opposite is true. Now, I may have only been a father for just 3 short weeks. And by the way, just as an aside, living in the flow has taken on an entirely new meaning in my house. But in those 3 short weeks, I can tell you this. When I look into Harper's eyes, there's more than just an empty container there that's ready to be filled up with the wisdom and knowledge of the world. There's a power and a presence that sparkles behind those eyes, and it sparkles behind the eyes of every child. You can see it in every child that you look at. So what happens? Why do we lose that understanding of the power and presence of God? Well, we get filled with the so-called wisdom of the world. And some of that wisdom is valid. Some of it has great value to our life. You know, things like, if you don't feel well, go see a doctor, and a doctor can help you feel better. Things like, if you're going to cook a meal, you want to make sure you cook the food to a certain temperature so you don't get sick. These are things that the wisdom of the world has learned and passed on to us that it's good for us to know. That's not the sort of stuff I'm talking about needing to let go of. It's still going to be a good idea for you to look both ways before you cross the street. What I'm talking about needing to let go of is the wisdom of the world that we've learned that leads us to believe we're separate, that leads us to believe there's limitation. These facts that we've conditioned to believe that there is limitation, that there's some need that has to come from outside of us to make us whole. Now, sometimes these are personal beliefs. They're things we hold about ourselves, these beliefs that I'm not good enough, or I'm always not feeling well, I'm always sick, or I always don't have enough money to support the things I need to support myself doing. Sometimes those are those sorts of personal beliefs that we've come to learn. And these personal beliefs, they tend to keep living within us because, as we know, our thoughts are held in mind, and they take after that. And these sorts of thoughts, they end up taking us out of the divine flow of God because they're so out of nature with what the flow of God is in the first place. God is flowing as perfect health. God is flowing as perfect peace. God is flowing as abundance. And so when we think thoughts other than that, when we think thoughts of fear or illness or fear of illness, we're not creating those things, but we're removing ourselves from the flow of God. And we cut ourselves off from that divine flow. And as we cut ourselves off from that divine flow, there's a scientific principle that says that nature abhors a vacuum. And anytime there's not something to rush in and fill that space with, nature's going to find something to fill it up with. And so if you've removed yourself from that divine flow of God by thinking thoughts of lack, then those thoughts that are part of our world that say this stuff is existing come rushing in. It's just like you can see on this slide behind me, where you can see the water flowing through and there's each of those little rocks that are getting in the way. Our work becomes in removing those rocks to open up the flow of God that much more in our lives. Now, it's really easy for our own personal thoughts to get in the way of experiencing the divine flow of God, but sometimes it's our thoughts as human beings, as a race of people experiencing this life together on planet Earth that hold us back. We put limitations on ourselves as humans, and those limitations can affect how we interact with the world. And so the next time you hear somebody say, "That's impossible, that can't be done," or the next time you feel like something's impossible or it can't be done, world peace is impossible, we'll never get to that. There's too many people, each having their own ideas, it's not a possibility. The next time you hear that or start to think that for yourself, I want you to remember this number, 359. And I'll tell you why I want you to remember that number. How many of you have heard the name Roger Bannister? There's a few of you who have. Well, for those of you who haven't heard of Roger before, Roger Bannister was a distinguished English neurologist and an Olympic runner in the 1950s. And if you look back in the record books, if you go home after this and look up in the record books, you'll have a hard time finding his name written anywhere, with the exception of one place. Roger Bannister was the first man to run a sub-4-minute mile. Now, this may not seem like a whole lot to us today, but at one time, breaking this barrier was actually considered impossible. You see, the mile has existed since ancient Roman times. The Romans used the mile to measure how long it took a legion of troops to march, taking 2 steps each soldier, 5,280 feet. And for years, thousands of years, no one, not one single person, could eclipse the 4-minute mark. And for that reason, sports writers and physicists postulated that human evolution has its limits. And running a mile in less than 4 minutes is one of those limits. We'll never be able to eclipse that mark. And then Roger Bannister changed history. He did the impossible. In 1954, Roger Bannister became the first human being ever to run a mile in under 4 minutes. His time, 3 minutes, 59 seconds, 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. I'll be fair to Roger, 0.4 seconds. But the most amazing thing happened after Bannister broke the record. Just 46 days later, his record was broken. And then it was broken again, and again, and again. Now, the lesson is an important one, and it has absolutely nothing to do with running and absolutely nothing to do with a 4-minute mile. The lesson for us to take from this is that Bannister smashed through the real problem that prevents most of our successes, our own beliefs. You see, we'd convinced ourselves that it was simply something that was impossible to achieve, that there was no way anybody could run a mile in under 4 minutes. However, the truth is that each and every one of us, each and every person here is able to access a divine flow within them and to use that flow to help you achieve and guide you to achieve the very thing that you set out to accomplish. See, Bannister believed it was possible. And because of that, he opened himself up to a divine flow that helped move him in a way to train and tune his body to do the very thing that the entire world thought was impossible. And once that door was opened, and it became open for everybody. Now, it's not simply enough to know that the things that we think, the beliefs we have, can either open or restrict our flow to God. It wouldn't have simply been enough for Bannister to sit there and think, I know I can run a mile in under 4 minutes. We have to put feet to our actions. We have to go out and work and do the things to condition ourselves to be able to achieve all that we're capable of achieving. We have to live our lives every day striving for growth, striving for a life that's lived from an awareness of the awesome power of Spirit that is flowing within each and every one of you right now. As Butterworth says in Spiritual Economics, we have to strive to grow our wings every day. It's every day that we have to work at being within the flow of God. And there are many, many ways to work at putting yourself into the flow of God. And each one of them, it's ultimately about the same thing. To put it in a phrase that our traditional Christian friends would typically use, it's about getting yourself in the right relationship with God. It's about getting yourself in the right relationship with the divine flow that's radiating through you right now in this moment. So that ultimately that flow becomes the place from which you live your lives in each and every moment. Now, the truth is we could spend hours going over each and every little tool and each and every piece of that and everything you could use to get into the flow of God. But I know the Chiefs kick off at noon. And for some of you, I'm already on borrowed time. So today we're going to focus on just one aspect that you can give of yourself to help bring you back into that flow of God. Now, in the past weeks, you've heard Reverend Bob talk about the T3 program here at this ministry and how the giving of your time can help move you into that flow of God. In the coming weeks, you're going to hear Reverend Bob talk more about the T3 program and how giving of your treasure can help move you into that flow of God. And as you hear those things, I want you to remember that this is about more than making a commitment to this as your spiritual community. This is about making a commitment to your own spiritual journey. It's about making a commitment to opening the faucet and allowing the flow of God to course through you as good, as abundance, and as the infinite love of a kingdom ready to give you the keys to that kingdom. But it all revolves around this idea of giving of yourself. And so today we're going to look at a different type of giving, a giving of your talents. And how as you give of your talents, you open up more of that flow. You see, as you give, it's just like this stream. As that water flows down past this image, it doesn't leave anything empty behind it. It's giving its water to the next place down in the stream, but there's more water that rushes in to fill that up. And as you give, the same thing happens. As you give from that flow within you, the flow of God comes in behind to fill that flow up in even greater ways. And the truth is, each and every one of us here has a talent to give to the world. Now, I'm not talking about the America's Got Talent type of talents here. Although if entertainment is your gift, that is certainly a valid talent to have. It's just not all of us are destined for Top Chef. In fact, sometimes it seems like it's the simple things that make the biggest impact in our world. Now, yesterday, our Renovate to Elevate team got together to do some repair work to two houses. The team used their talents to repair these two houses in Kansas City, Kansas. Now, there was one home, one family, that the family was facing some fairly significant health challenges. It just wasn't possible for them to move around the house and to do the sort of upkeep and maintenance they needed to do. I'm told they had a wind that blew through the house at all times, making it very hard to keep the house warm. Another house that they worked on had 5 double-pane windows that were missing the bottom glass. So you can imagine, this was going to be a very cold winter for two families had this team not stepped forward with their talents. They used their talents to make a difference in the world around them. Now, it's not about doing these things in big or in flashy ways. The members of the team that went out and did that repair work yesterday did it not knowing or having any idea I was going to stand here today and speak about it. They didn't do it with the expectation that they would get any sort of praise for their work. They did it to give back to the world from their talents. And by the way, let me say thank you to everybody who was a member of that team that went out and made such a wonderful difference in this community. Because it's through giving like that, giving from a place of selflessness, that you open up yourself to the flow of God that much more. You see, true giving is not something that you do for someone or to someone. It's not something you do for yourself or for recognition. Jesus said to not let the left hand know what the right hand was doing. True giving is actually a giving that comes from your consent to allow the flow of God to flow through you to that someone. And as that flow of God flows through you, it increases the space for a greater flow of God within you. Now, I know there are some of you out there that are sitting there saying, that's great, but you don't want me to do any sort of repair work around the house. It would be in worse shape than it was when it started. I've tried, I can't think of a talent. I don't have a talent. Well, I'm here to tell you today that yes, you do. Each and every one of you has a talent. Each and every one of you has a gift to give to the world. So before you tell me that you've tried and there just isn't anything there, let me give you a few ideas to help you uncover what your gift is. And the first thing you can do is listen to other people. Listen to what they're telling you. Is there that thing in your life that your friends are always calling you to have done around their house or to have you help them do? Or maybe they're asking their friends to, go talk to them. They know how to do this. Maybe you always get called to help somebody negotiate for a new car. Or you always get a phone call to have somebody come help you fix their car. Or you get that phone call that says, I just left a store and I have all of this electronic equipment and routers and computers and printers and I know they're all supposed to talk to each other, but I don't have an idea how to do that. Could you come help me? That points you towards things that you're good at. And the things that you're good at are the talents that you have to give to the world. And the second thing to look for is something that flows out of that. What are the things that come easily to you? Is there anything in your life that you find really easy or obvious to do when it seems like others struggle at it? And I can give you an example from my own personal life. My wife is a genius when it comes to using Excel to create databases and spreadsheets. She's amazing at it. I can give her information and she has it done in 5-10 minutes. I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back and ask her how to make the spreadsheet so that this side of it stays where it is and this part scrolls up and down. It's not my gift. It's not something I'm good at. It seems really simple to her, but to me, it's a little bit more of a struggle. And the truth is, that's the way it works for all of us. The things in our life that seem really simple and obvious to all of us probably aren't to other people. They're just not. That's not really the way life works. So in that scenario, they struggle while you stand there feeling like it was a cakewalk. And so if something feels like a cakewalk to you, chances are that's a talent. And that's a talent that you can share and give to the world. Another thing you can do is to think about those things that you enjoy the most in life. Is there a topic you're always loving to read about? TV shows you always like to watch? Books, movies? What is it that you really love? Think about a friend of mine that he absolutely loved a particular video game. And every time we would sit down with him, he would start talking about this game that none of the rest of his friends played, and none of us had any idea what he was talking about. And he's sitting there going on about how, well, if he does something in this way, the program makes it do this, and he can get more points. And we all just sat there and went, great. But that was a talent that he had. It pointed to a talent towards programming and working with computers. He was fascinated with how that worked. And it kind of leads to another topic. If there's something that you're always talking about that everybody else in the room is sitting there going, would you stop talking about that already? If I have to hear about that one more time, chances are that's pointing towards a hidden passion within you. And with my friend Matt, it was pointing towards computers and programming. And so that's what he does now. He works with computers. He works with programming computers and creating 3D models. But all of that came out of something that he was passionate about. And if worse comes to worse and you're still sitting there going, I can't think of one single talent to give to the world, just ask. Ask your friends, ask your family members, ask people who know you. Now the catch is you have to ask people who are willing to be honest and authentic with you. I want to just ask the people like, oh yeah, Brandon, you're a great singer. The rest of you might disagree. But ask them to give an honest assessment of what they think your talents are. Ask more than just one or two people, and then take the list that you've developed and look at that list and see if there's things that stick out, that more than one person said, you know what, Jan, you are really great at giving prayer support and being a centered presence for everyone. And there's a hidden talent that you may not have known about. So as you start to uncover your talents, I want you to remember that it's not just enough to know what your talent is. You have got to share it with the world. You see, when you know what your talents are and you're sharing them with the world, you feel more in time with life. You feel more in the flow of life. The sun tends to shine just a little bit brighter. The jerks that you encounter, they tend to be a little less jerky. Life is just flowing through you, not to you, because you're willing to give and share of your talent with the world. You have a purpose, and then you add a vision and a plan to that purpose and your talents, and you have no choice but to excel in the world. Because you see, ultimately life is all about growing in an awareness of the Spirit. It's about growing in an awareness of the truth that life is a flowing experience and that there's a divine desire to flow forth as life, as substance, as love and intelligence. And all that is required is that we give way, let it be, and let God be God in us. And when you give of your talents, you give in an amazing way. It's just as Khalil Gibran said in his classic work, The Prophet, that you give but little when you give of your possessions. It's when you give of yourself that you truly give. And so as you move through life, as you begin to explore being in the flow of God, think, give. For life is best lived from the within out. God bless you all.